Reading with your kids.
Hola, ni hao, konnichiwa, assalamu alaikum, shalom, mahaba, moni muli wanji, jambo, bienvenidos. Hi, my name is Jedley, and this is the Reading with Your Kids podcast. We're coming to you from the beautiful neighborhood of Reedville in the southwest corner of Boston, Massachusetts. We are so delighted that you're part of our beautiful Reading with Your Kids family. Please be sure to subscribe to the show on the iHeartRadio app, on Ghana, Himalaya, Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon Music, wherever you find your podcast. We're really excited that you are joining us in our mission to help families grow closer through reading. Our guests today, Matt Eventoff and Thomas Ray Garcia. They are here to celebrate Speechless. Before we begin our celebration of Speechless with Matt and Thomas, we want to celebrate a brand new Reading with Your Kids certified great read. I Am Nuclear Fusion by Muriel Fitzpatrick. So much to love about this book. I Am Nuclear Fusion by Muriel Fitzpatrick is more than just a cute bedtime story. It is an inspirational story, reminding kids that they are loved and that even though they may not see it now, that they can grow up to do great things and shine like a star. It also provides kids with a view of how a great story is created. The main character book is Rita, a young girl who does not feel special. She doesn't feel that she's a star like her friends. We hear Rita tell her story 4 different times. And at the end of each telling, Rita's teacher tells her how she can make the story better by adding details, action, and color. We love that I Am Nuclear Fusion celebrates diversity. Rita and her friends love each other despite being of different races, having different interests and talents. Our final verdict, 5 stars. I Am Nuclear Fusion can be the catalyst that will inspire important family conversations about self-love, the importance of being kind, and dreaming. It would be a great addition to any family library. Congratulations once again, Muriel Fitzpatrick. Her book, I Am Nuclear Fusion, is our latest Reading with Your Kids certified great read. If you are the author of a great children's book, we would encourage you to check out our website, readingwithyourkids.com. Click on the Authors tab at the top of the page. Scroll down to Certified Great Reads to find out about how this program can help your book stand out from the crowd of books that are published every single month. Joining us right now from 2 different spots here in the United States. One of our guests is in Princeton, New Jersey. Our other guest is on the southern border of Texas. Please welcome to the show Thomas Ray Garcia and Matt Eventoff. They're here to talk to us about their book, Speechless. Thomas, Matt, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jed.
Thank you so much for having us, Jed.
You're very welcome. That second voice was the voice of Thomas Ray Garcia. Thomas, why don't you tell us a little bit about Speechless?
Yeah, Speechless is our first children's picture book in a series called Speak with Style Books. And it follows the story of Amelia Martinez, an 8-year-old girl who's terrified to speak, so much so that she misses her turn to speak at a public speaking competition, and in her place approaches Mr. Rhetoric, a mysterious figure with a mysterious box that steals all the voices away from the fellow villagers. And it's up to Amelia to go and take the voices back. Along the way, she overcomes some public speaking obstacles, finds her own voice, and makes a new friend.
Wow, very cool. And now, Matt, one of the things that I've heard throughout my life is that public speaking is one of the top worries through most folks. You know, if you would ask somebody what they're most afraid of, public speaking is something that many, many people would say.
There's no question about it, and it's really interesting. And one of the impetuses or the impeti, I guess, for Thomas and I doing this and conducting this is in our work. And Thomas and I met through public speaking. We found that students and kids are becoming nervous at younger and younger ages and showing that kids being afraid during a show and tell, things that really kids shouldn't be afraid in. When I was in show and tell, I was, I guess, not smart enough to be self-aware, or self-aware enough, I guess would be the better term, to be nervous before showing and speaking. And Thomas and I really want to teach the world, and we want to teach them for free, that especially kids, find your voice. We want to empower children to find their voices and to be able to use their voices and speak up and feel confident speaking up before they turn into adults who become nervous. I spend a great deal of my time as a working professional helping people who are nervous because they weren't able to find their voices at younger ages. And we want to dispel that and eradicate that.
Yeah. Thomas, being able to speak and communicate to individuals or to groups, it's such a wonderful skill to have. Can you talk a little bit about the advantages of being able to get up in front of a crowd and speak?
I totally agree, Jed, and I learned from firsthand experience. The way Matt and I met actually was through a public speaking organization at Princeton University in late 2013, and I struggled to speak in front of crowds. I was 19 years old at Princeton University, and I had never taken a public speaking course. Public speaking wasn't a part of my day-to-day life, and once a week this organization called Speak with Style came into play, where Matt was our advisor. We were just undergrads wanting to improve our speaking style because we realized no matter what field we were going to go to, whether it was writers, teachers, tech, anything, we would have to speak in public, and we had to get better at it. And it was through simple public speaking practicums, focusing on one thing at a time and being open to criticism day to day, that we realized it's about the public speaking and communicating your message, but it's also about being vulnerable and being open to improvement. And Matt and I in 2016 came up with the idea of this book so we can take that message of Speak with Style and spread it to more people. And my background comes in education. I'm the founder of a college access nonprofit here in South Texas, and I work with juniors and seniors in high school all the time. I work with them on public speaking directly. Matt and I wanted to reach an even younger audience to make sure that this issue of stage fright, learning how to communicate clearly, and all these other public speaking topics could be communicated to kids at a much younger age through a public speaking book.
Yeah. Matt, I think a lot of people assume that the ability to get up in front of an audience and speak effectively, speak confidently without being fearful, that's something people are born with, and you either got it or you don't have it. I know for myself, I learned it. Do you agree that this is absolutely something people can learn, and it's not just one of those things that you either do have it or you don't have it and you can't get it?
100%, without question. The best speakers I've ever seen and I've ever worked with have all, to a person, said that they were extremely uncomfortable at one point in time or another. Many of them uncomfortable every time they give a presentation, which is another really fact that most people don't know. Most people are nervous before they give a speech, whether they've given 5 or they've given 5,000. No different than most professional athletes are anxious before they go out on the court, or they go onto the field, or they come up to the plate. And you see this, and you see different athletes or performers or musicians have different rituals or routines that they do, whether it's visualization or breathing. You see LeBron James throw big smoke up, and I have no idea whether he's afraid before he speaks or not, but he has a routine because he has millions of eyes on him every time he plays, and that's an amount of pressure, and he needs to get himself psyched up. It's no different with speaking. Everyone can become a stronger communicator. Everyone. There are 2 silver bullets, and unfortunately, they're not fun, and they're not true silver bullets. They are preparation and practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I am somebody who absolutely did not come to public speaking naturally. As a kid, I stuttered like crazy. I could barely get a sentence out. I kind of learned with the help of some great therapists how to get through that. But then one of the memories I have in high school, and it came back to me as we began this conversation, is getting up as a sophomore and needing to, present to my class of maybe 15 or 20 classmates. And at the end of the presentation, the teacher coming up and standing where I was standing and looking up at the ceiling and saying, I'm looking for the cue cards that you were reading from. I can't see them. Where evidently, I just looked at the ceiling the entire time I was in front of the group.
I've seen that before, and you're not alone, Jed. I mean, I can bring up whether it is Beyonce, Winston Churchill, Adele, John F. Kennedy, Abraham Lincoln. History is filled today on this great day where we honor a legend, one of the human beings who has had more impact on us than any way, Dr. Martin Luther King, the great Reverend. Reverend King practiced his presentations, his speeches, his oratory constantly. This is something that you can work on. This is not something, there are obviously people who are born with talents that are stronger than others, but oratory is something that everyone can achieve. Everyone. Whether you're 4, 14, 44, or if you have people watching that are 84, everyone can get stronger. It's just a matter of doing it, practicing it, watching yourself, and just getting more comfortable, but really finding your voice, because this world needs the voices of young people right now more than ever.
Absolutely. Thomas, Matt brought up Dr. King, and Dr. King certainly was able to speak and move millions of people with the power of his ideas, but also in the passion that he was able to express those ideas with. I don't expect that many people who are listening to this are going to be called upon to change the entire world like Dr. King did, but everybody listening at some point is going to have the power to change somebody's world, including their own. You work with kids, helping kids get into college, especially kids who are going to have a more difficult time getting into college. How important is it for young people in terms of their futures to be able to communicate, to be able to sit down and have that confident interview with a college recruiter?
It's really everything. I've seen so many different types of students, and the common type, and a type I believe I was when I was 18, was I knew what I wanted to do. I knew who I was internally, but it didn't really matter if I couldn't communicate that either verbally or on the page. For so many years, I focused on helping students empower themselves and form their identity through the college admissions essay. When it came to the college interview, I noticed there would be some stumbling blocks that I would put to the side in the second semester of senior year, knowing that it was optional, that it wouldn't make or break their college admissions process. But then I realized when they became freshmen at the college that they still struggled to speak and communicate with their fellow peers, and they especially had trouble getting up and doing an impromptu speech in a course, or even just going up to the professor and introducing themselves. That's when I started taking public speaking a lot more seriously in my curriculum down here, and helping students communicate who they are in many different ways and feeling comfortable with their story. When I was in college, I was a first-generation low-income student, and empowering myself through that story took some time because I had to reframe what it meant to communicate and to frame my message of one that I was proud of. Once you learn how to communicate, and once you learn how to frame your story around one of empowerment and identity formation, you know what kind of identity you're forming for yourself. It's such an incredible life-changing thing. I always like to think that college admissions isn't just in the weeds work of filling out financial aid, applying to X, Y, Z university, but it's about becoming a better person and finding out who you are. And I think public speaking becomes a tremendous part of that.
Wow. A couple of things you brought up that I just want to touch on. I remember being in college and wanting, being in this big lecture hall, and I kind of loved it because I could just sit in the crowd and be invisible. And the idea of introducing myself to that professor was the last thing that was on my mind. In fact, it's like, I don't want to do that at all. How important is that for a student not only to do that, but to be able to do that?
It's funny, Jed. I used that same exact example just a couple weeks ago with the students. And since we're all virtual learning right now, many students actually do feel that way at the high school level behind a screen. They feel invisible. They don't know how to reach out to their instructors, even if they might be struggling. And from the instructor's side, they don't know the student's struggling, either because they literally can't see them on the screen or they can't get a sense of what they're feeling. And so I help the students become better self-advocates by teaching them step by step how to reach out. When I was a high school senior, I struggled with standing up in front of a class and speaking. Online, I still struggle to send that cold email and writing a message to someone I don't know yet and making that first impression. And I see that with a lot of my high school seniors right now. What I've been often doing recently in my virtual classrooms is having students speak for a couple seconds, whether they're on camera or not, just so they can hear the sound of their own voice and they can feel like they're participating actively in whatever lesson we're holding that day. I feel that once you put the ball in the student's court, they'll run with it. And once they actually articulate what's on their mind, not only do they reflect on the content of what they said, but how they said it. My concern about the 1 year of virtual learning we've been in so far is that lack of verbal communication that, of course, changes online. But I am concerned about when they do go off to college, what kind of skills are they transferring to the real world and not transferring to the real world? I believe if we make an active effort through virtual learning in particular to have students learn how to speak to screens, whether they're looking at the person they're talking to or whether they're looking at their own reflection on the screen, they can learn how to communicate the different sides of their identity. And they can feel comfortable doing so when they get to college and they don't have to feel invisible anymore.
Yeah. And another thing, and I hope I'm articulating this correctly, I think what I heard you say, that it's important for young people and for everybody to be able to tell their own story through a sense of empowerment. Am I getting that right? And if I am, what do you mean by that?
Yes, definitely. Through the college admissions essay, students often worry, am I getting the best self across that the admissions officers want to see? And when I work with them one-on-one, I help them understand it's not what the admissions officer wants to see. It's who you are already. What your life experiences have led up to this point are worthy of writing about and worthy of learning of. And that's the initial lesson. Soon after, when we start to focusing on the college interview process, this is when public speaking comes into play. When they learn the harder lesson of how do I articulate verbally everything that I've been writing down and thinking about so far, and putting their identity first and foremost, that they're not afraid to share that I'm coming from the perspective of a low-income first-generation college student. This was often a topic I brought up when I was in college when Matt and I were at Speak with Style. When we talk about any topic, we're coming at it from a different perspective all the time, especially if we're doing impromptu speaking. So beginning with the identity can often be a great grounding point. It can also help contextualize whatever you're about to say. So if I have to comment on something that's happening in the news this week, and I begin my speech by saying, my experience as a first-generation college student informs me that, or something similar, it helps set the stage, and it also helps me communicate who I am first and foremost without having to hide that part of my identity.
Mm-hmm. That's a great piece of advice and a great tool. Matt, what are some of the, you and I spoke a little bit about, some techniques that you and I use. What other kind of things can we do to help us feel more comfortable speaking in public, either to one person or to a group of people?
One of my favorite things to do and one of my favorite techniques is to actually just tape myself, whether it is video or it's strictly audio, before I'm going to present, before I'm going to talk, even reading a book, like our book, reading it aloud and reading it and learning intonation and inflection and tone and cadence and seeing what works naturally for you. I'm a big believer in Bruce Lee, and one of Bruce Lee's most famous quotes is when asked about taking on his new martial art, he said, use what works, discard the rest. And I believe no one's speaking style is the same as someone else's. My speaking style is different than Thomas's, is different than yours. We all have natural strengths. And the way to find those strengths is to tape yourself and to listen. I'll listen to this podcast and I'll watch it, but I'll do them separately just to get a feel for how I did and to see what I liked and how I can do more of that, to see areas that I might do differently the next time so that I can adjust and pivot and do more of that. And that's what Thomas and I did a lot of at Speak with Style. That's what I encourage people to do of all ages, whether you're the CEO of a company or a 12-year-old reading our book. And that's one of the reasons we made our book available for free. It's available for free download. Speakwithstylebooks.com. We don't ask for an email address. We ask for nothing. We really just want to help young people find their voices. We offer it for sale as well on Amazon with 100% of the profit, every penny of revenue going to provide physical copies to at-risk young people to have a physical book with the physical pictures. Mm-hmm. Because every young person, every person should have a voice, mm-hmm. because every person does have a voice, mm-hmm. and we want to help as many kids as possible find theirs.
Yeah. Now, this is going to sound trivial, and I don't mean it to be, but one of the things that I hear from people, whether it's people who've been on the podcast or that I'm collaborating with on other podcasts, is that they hate listening to themselves. They hate doing what you said we should do, which is to tape themselves and to listen to themselves. And I understand why they do, but, they say, that's not me. I hear that, and I can't believe that I sound like that. It's not what I hear all the time. Can you talk a little bit about that, Matt?
Absolutely. I mean, I would say, Jed, if I put myself back into 10-year-old Matt and summon my 10-year-old self, I didn't like falling off of a bicycle. I didn't like falling off of a skateboard. I didn't like missing a basketball. When I was an amateur boxer, I didn't like getting hit. There were a lot of things I didn't like that I needed to do in order to improve. I didn't like getting C's in school. I certainly didn't like getting D's in school, and I got plenty of them in my younger days. But it was getting those C's and D's that enabled me the ability to get the A's and the B's. It was falling off of the bike that taught me how to ride it. It was falling off of the skateboard that taught me how to ride it. It was getting hit when boxing that taught me how to evade a punch. And speaking's no different. I can still remember I was 12 when I heard myself on one of those old, and most people on your podcast are probably way too young to remember, but listening on an old answering machine and hearing my voice for the first time, and I said, wait, who is that person? That's not me. This must be a bad tape recorder. This can't possibly be me. And it's a natural feeling, and we don't like hearing ourselves. We don't like seeing ourselves because we're very, very self-critical. All of us are very self-critical, in my opinion, too self-critical. And I put myself at the top of that list. But the idea is the more you hear it, the more you condition yourself to it, the better you're going to get and the less uncomfortable you are going to be. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I'm not going to promise anyone comfort, but I can promise you will have less discomfort, which will eventually morph into comfort.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the things that I share with young magicians and kids that see me perform that ask me if I'm ever nervous, and one of the things that I learned was to be able to turn that nervous feeling, because being nervous is very, very similar to being excited. And that's one of the things I trained myself to do, is to just, when I felt those nerves, those butterflies starting to happen when I'm backstage or setting up, it's to kind of perceive them as, I'm really excited. I'm not scared, I'm not nervous, I'm just excited to be in front of this audience.
To that point, Jed, and the reason for that is because to your body, aside from in between our ears, to our physical body, the difference between excitement and nervousness doesn't exist. It's all the acute stress response. For our body physically, there is no difference between excitement and nervousness. It's the acute stress response. Our digestion slows down, our heart rate increases, our vision gets a little bit more narrow, we lose a little bit of a periphery because we're getting ready to perform. So what you do is the advice, and it's now been studied in the past 4 or 5 years. I've worked with a researcher, Dr. Jeremy Jameson, University of Rochester. Shout out to Jeremy, who's really made a career of researching this. And what if people reframe fear? And what if people realize that other than this organ, this muscle between our ears, everything else, our body doesn't know. It's the same. It literally is the same reaction. No gradation of difference. The same reaction. So it's all what we put to it. Mm-hmm. Our body doesn't know whether we are about to know that we won the lottery or we're about to speak in front of 1,000 people. It depends on what we put to it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's cool. I love this subject because being in front of an audience, public speaking is such a part of my life. It's been my life for the past 30 years. And it's really cool, and I really miss it because we haven't been able to do it because of the pandemic. But Thomas, one of the things that Matt just touched on, both of you are very, very passionate about sharing these skills, especially with kids in need and kids at risk, and you both believe that it's really, really important to give kids who are at risk these skills so they can lift themselves up. I'm wondering, Thomas, how important you think it is for these kids to be able to find their voice and to communicate their stories for the rest of us to hear. I know it's important for a kid to be able to speak up for themselves, but how important is it for them finding their own voice so that we can learn from them?
There's two things from that. One is when a young person stands up and shares their stories and their thoughts, it's a self-empowering event, and they get to hear themselves, often for the first time, articulate something that truly matters to them. And I think that is such a formative process. You know, the educator's dilemma is always, man, I wish I would have gotten this student earlier. I could have made such an even bigger impact on their lives. So our idea with the book was, let's start with students ages 6 to 10, help them with this crucial aspect of their lives that sometimes they don't even get to when they get to high school, college. And then once they get to high school, college, they got it down. Now it's just a matter of running with it. The second part is the audience. When audiences hear people share their stories, especially young children, they get to see that, hey, we're not so different after all. We might come from different backgrounds. We might look different. We might even be from different areas of the country. But when we share our stories and we stand up and speak, we actually see that we have a lot more in common than we think. And that's something that I learned way too late when I was a college student at Speak with Style. Our organization was full of students from all these different majors all across the world. And it made me feel more like a Princetonian when I was able to sit in that room for an hour every week and just listen to people share who they were, their thoughts on issues, and putting themselves in that vulnerable moment that they were willing to get feedback from me, their audience, and learn who I was in the process as well. Yeah. So we want kids to be able to experience that, and I hope our book can help facilitate that and normalize that, whether it's at home, whether it's in the classroom, wherever they pick up the book, they can feel inspired to stand up and speak.
Yeah. One of the things that I've come to learn in my life, whether it's from being on stage, from being in the room with masters at the craft that I'm trying to present to kids, or even just traveling to different countries, is that learning to be vulnerable can be a really empowering experience for a lot of us.
To me, it's everything. To me, vulnerability is everything. Again, we are such harsh critics of ourselves. I think if most people realize that you're never going to face a harsher critic than the one that you see in the mirror every day, it would empower a lot of people. I would imagine, and I think, and today, again, we celebrate Dr. King, and I certainly can't speak for Dr. King. I would never even try. But I think Dr. King was a human being, and to believe that there weren't moments that Dr. King was nervous or self-judgmental or self-critical, I think would be wrong. I mean, I think, and what did Dr. King do? He stepped through it because he had a much bigger mission. Mm-hmm. And he realized it was much bigger than him, and he had a lot to do, and he had a lot of light to bring to this world. And what Thomas and I see are students all over the place who have so much light to bring into this world, and they just need permission. Not literal permission. They just need someone to tell them, you matter. Mm-hmm. And your message matters, and your voice matters. Yeah. And I think Thomas and I both, through different backgrounds, but through many similarities in our backgrounds, I mean, I think we both, it's a message that certainly would have resonated with us in younger years. I don't want to speak for you, Thomas, but I would imagine it's a fair statement. It's just so important for kids, and really for kids, to understand your voice matters. Mm-hmm. You matter as much as I matter.
Absolutely. Well, I know one of the things that matters in this interview is that we need to let folks know where they can go to find out more about Speechless and everything that you folks are doing.
Yes, they can visit our website, speakwithstylebooks.com, to learn more about Matt and me and download our book in English, Spanish, or Portuguese for free. They can also find the book on Amazon.com, and any purchase of a physical copy, 100% of those proceeds go toward our charity to help more kids get this book. And they can also find more information about the bigger pictures behind the book at cslapofficial.com. That is my nonprofit that helps distribute this book here in South Texas and help young children in elementary school stand up and speak. And when they get to high school, we help them go to college.
That's awesome.
Jed, one more plug before you go, if I could.
Absolutely.
Next week, Thomas and I are going to be releasing our first free graphic novel on Speak with Style Books, aimed at older students, 13 really up until 80, and it's a graphic novel to do exactly what you've been talking about this whole time. Real tips, physical tips that people can utilize to gain more comfort. It's called Speak Fearlessly. There are going to be real tips to help those butterflies go away. It's going to be completely free again on speakwithstylebooks.com. And it's our first graphic novel. We're really excited about it. And again, completely free. Find your voice.
Absolutely. This has been a fascinating conversation, and we've had such a great time speaking with our guests about Speechless and about public speaking and helping young people find their voice. And we've been speaking with Matt Eventoff and Thomas Ray Garcia. My friends, thank you so much for being part of the show today.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Jed.
Please be sure to join us for the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast. Our guest will be Tonya Duncan Ellis. She'll be here to celebrate her Sophie Washington series. Really, really great conversation. You don't want to miss it. Want to thank the folks who made today's show so very wonderful. Of course, want to thank our guests, Matt Eventoff and Thomas Ray Garcia. Be sure to check out Speechless. Also want to thank my team, Alejandra Doherty, Fatima Khan. I want to thank my beautiful wife for all the support she gives me. I want to thank Augie the doggy for having my back here in the studio. But most of all, we want to thank you. Thank you so very much for joining us today. And as always, thank you so very much for taking the time to make the world a better place by reading with your kids. I'll be looking for you in the next edition of the Reading with Your Kids podcast.